Welcome, everybody. This is session MAE204, Never a Slow News Day, Transforming 24/7 News Operations. So I'm Steph Lone. I am the global leader here at AWS for the Media, Entertainment, Games, and Sports Solution Architecture Business Unit. So super excited to be here, and I'm absolutely pleased to have a great all-star cast here next to me. I've got Michael Cutter. He is the SVP of Media Technology and Development at Warner Brothers Discovery. And I've got Ross Dagan with me here, EVP and Head of Newsroom Operations at CBS News and Stations. I also have Alia Moli, who is our Senior Industry Specialist in Business Development for Media, Entertainment, Games, and Sports here at AWS. So super excited. It has been a very, very busy news year, I think, don't you guys? Today we're going to really be talking about the transformation that both CBS News and Stations as well as CNN have been driving, both in their technical as well as the strategy transformations that they're making. Everything from their how they are extracting more value out of their current and archival content, how they're accelerating their workflows using AI/ML, and how that is helping them increase their user and viewer engagement. So with that, let's go next slide. Sorry, Alia, I didn't realize. We at AWS have had over 15 years of experience working with amazing customers like Paramount and CBS News and Stations and WBD and CNN. This is just a small subset here showing different customers that we've had experience working with. And these are global customers, everybody from BBC to Disney to Nippon TV, Foxtel, News Corp, just to name a few here. One thing that's super important is AWS comes and brings the expertise. And so AWS has had and brought in experts. Ali comes from a long line of expertise in the industry, as do I. And expertise is important because, as Andy Jassy has said, there's no good compression algorithm for experience. And having that experience has helped us work with our customers on their journey. 90% of our services and feature requests for our services come actually from our customers and our partners. Next slide. So speaking of partners, anybody who's in this media and entertainment gig knows that you can't do this alone. We work with over 600 different partners in the community, in our partner community. And these are just some of the names, and you may hear some of these names today as well. And they really help our customers transform into some key solution areas. We go to market and we have conversations in 6 key areas around content production, media supply chain and archive, broadcast, direct-to-consumer, data science and analytics for media, or AI for entertainment, and monetization. So with that, I think the news has been facing some really interesting challenges, and I'm going to have Ali talk a little bit about what's going on today.
Thanks, Steph. These are just a handful of the challenges that we're seeing our customers face. Globally, there's an increasingly fragmented audience across multiple platforms, whether it's the latest social media apps, digital, social, TV, web, etc. People are consuming news across a diverse set of platforms, and there's a diverse set of interests. Furthermore, there's a growing trend in what's being called news avoidance, where a lot of viewers, when they're surveyed, are saying that they're getting fatigued by the news because either there's too much political content or too much bad news that they can't do anything about, or too many things that they feel is just overwhelming. So being able to resonate and give messaging to the audience the way that they will resonate with them has been a challenge for a number of our customers. And we've all seen a growing statements about fake news and misinformation. There's a much greater concern these days about the amount of misinformation that's out there across multiple channels and what's real news versus what's fake news. Furthermore, there's increasing threats to news organizations, not just from a physical standpoint, but also cybersecurity threats, natural disasters, etc. And of course, there's increasing business pressures to always do more with less. On top of that, news by its very nature requires the ability to react to unpredictable events in whatever location that they may occur. You need to be able to adapt to the workflows and use the best tools to create compelling content and engage your audience. When you think about traditional systems, traditional news systems, a lot of the broadcast systems that I grew up building, there's a high cost and complexity for those traditional on-prem systems. And oftentimes we would be architecting them for what would be the busiest news day. We'd be building things for maximum load. And of course, a lot of times there's not that much happening. These days, there's almost never a slow news day, and so sometimes customers would be hitting their max capacity and they'd have to decide what to cover versus what to let go. And of course, on top of that, need to think about disaster recovery and resiliency and business continuity strategies, which adds more expense and complexity to those traditional systems. Then the time and resources required to plan out traditional systems, procure hardware, ship it, set it up, figure out how to geographically distribute it in effective manners. Those are all challenges that keep news organizations from truly focusing on what they want to do, which is getting the most compelling content and engaging and informing their viewers. And let's not even start talking about a lot of the expensive upgrades which require months of planning and downtime in the traditional sense. And the opportunity to transform that and leverage some of the things that we at AWS have been evangelizing for years in terms of CI/CD pipelines is a real game changer for a number of our customers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today. On top of all of that, think about the disparate systems, especially when we think of large global news organizations, the content silos, the data silos, all of the systems that they inherit and have to deal with and figure out how to break down those silos and allow their journalists, their editors, their reporters to get access to the content and data they need efficiently in order to get the most compelling stories out there as quickly as possible so they can break those stories and be the leads on breaking news. That really has made a lot of our customers think about what are ways that we can focus on that content creation process and the storytelling and the actual journalism and reporting rather than a lot of the manual and redundant tasks that a number of our customers are often faced with and spending a lot of time on. And as we've been talking with a number of our customers and working with them, we've also recognized that although a lot of us have instincts about there are better ways to do things and there must be more efficient ways to put systems in place or put workflows in place, we oftentimes lack the actual data which can help make data-informed decisions, that enterprise-wide visibility of how content is flowing across an organization, where resources are being spent. There's a big gap in traditional systems for that. And of course, all of these challenges that I've been talking about are things that AWS excels at, whether it's dealing with a deluge of content and data that newsrooms have to deal with, making resilient, elastic infrastructure on a global scale that news organizations can rely on to tell their stories, whether it's dealing with data or leveraging ML to recognize what's happening with content and data. Those are all things that AWS, of course, excels at, as you've seen this reInvent as well as many reInvents before. And those are the technological challenges. But we all know that technology is just one piece of this, and there's also organizational and transformational challenges that exist. And we're very fortunate today to have two of the visionaries of our industry here with Ross and Michael, and they have decades of experience leading huge technology and newsroom transformation projects. And I'd like to start with you, Ross. Could you please tell us a little bit about the incredible work that you've been doing at CBS News and Stations?
Well, firstly, thank you for all of you dragging yourself away from golf, basketball, soccer, whatever it is over there that's enormously distracting watching out from here. I think when Michael and I said yes to Steph and Ali, we didn't expect to be competing with such a sideshow out there, so thank you for giving us some attention. I think it paints quite a stark picture, doesn't it? The challenges that Ali's just gone through. They are big, hairy issues for the industry to be facing. But I think the way I look at it is the opportunities we have to be able to take those challenges and transform them into opportunities for our organization have been great. I'm hoping that most of you have awareness around CBS News and Stations. It's a legacy brand, but also a fast evolving brand and a contemporary brand. I think let's take a look at a quick video that gives us a sense of our work in recent times.
In the scrubland of southern Israel is strewn the aftermath of a bloody massacre.
Second siren in about 10 minutes.
What does Hamas want?
What comes next?
I'm Nora O'Donnell.
Holly Williams.
Tony DeCopel.
CBS News.
We were the first journalists to see the ships the Houthis have targeted.
Deborah Patta went to Central Africa at great risk to get the story of the Wagner Group.
You said you'll keep rapping as long as you have truth to give. What is your truth?
One of America's darkest chapters, the race massacre in the neighborhood known as Black Wall Street.
America has voted.
It's all about the numbers, and the numbers do tell the story. This map right here will bring it home for you.
Donald Trump is the 47th president of the United States.
This will truly be the golden age of America.
I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
You guys have any idea that you were going to capture the country the way you have?
Yeah.
Trying to be as truthful as possible is the only way to tell these stories.
What do you love about America? CBS Mornings!
You call for peace. Can you help negotiate peace? That is tonight's edition of the CBS Evening News. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Good night.
So a cross-section, obviously some recent events and some longer-term events, but it helps to look at the numbers as well, I think. And these are impressive. 766 billion minutes of time spent viewing CBS News and Stations content and content from CBS Media Ventures. We make more than 48,000 hours of content a year across all our news and stations and programmatic formats. And when you put those numbers into perspective, our audience reach is around 84% more than the combined numbers for many of the originals for some of the main streaming platforms that you'd all be very familiar with. So we reach a lot of eyeballs, we reach a lot of people, and it's important for us to be doing that in a contemporary way, in a way that helps transform our organization. You would be familiar with many of these brands, I'm sure, from legacy programs like 60 Minutes and 48 Hours. Our O&O stations across the country are an impressive asset in our portfolio. CBS Mornings is on the ascendancy. We just announced today CBS Evening News, when it relaunches in New York, will have an extra half hour on some of our local stations and our streaming network. And so there is a lot of activity going on around these brands and helping them ensure that we're continuing to carry on the legacy for CBS News and Stations. Across the country, multiple O&O stations, as you see here in the red dots, and bureaus, including some newly launched bureaus across Middle America, where we've taken a conscious decision to be more representative away from coastlines and put some of our people in the heartland, effectively, where there's much population growth and much conversation going on in terms of how we communicate best with our audiences. And so we've got a large global footprint as well as part of the Paramount world, obviously Network 10 Australia, Telefe, Chile Vision, Network 5 in the UK, as well as many other media assets. So it's a part of a large international group. And innovation has been something that's been at the heart of our existence for a long time now, as much as it's the reason we're talking today and the reason why Ali and Steph kindly asked Michael and I to be here. This quote is something that we use a lot at CBS News and Stations. The issue is, or not the issue is, the interesting thing is that it's from the 1960s. This is the first president of CBS News, Sig Mickelson, and he said innovation and imagination were the watchwords in the newsroom. And so we believe, even though, as Ali pointed out, there's some contemporary challenges that the news industry is facing, innovation has always been part of the news industry and the news industry's thinking. That's why we are where we are now, and that's why we've managed to be such a success in terms of our performance and our delivery to our audiences. But there's more to come, and there's more to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue. I'd love to, CNN is also such a large global news organization, a big powerhouse as well. Michael, I'd love for you to just kind of introduce yourself, your role, and maybe explain a little bit about CNN to those who may not know what it is.
Yeah. Michael Cutter, and I lead the team that basically does media systems development, and we handle like a lot of the file-based production systems and core journalism systems that support CNN. And I started CNN 20 years ago, and so we're on like our 5th generation of some of the systems. And in my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined what we've built in the past year, and especially in our recent shift to the cloud. So it's been an amazing ride, and CNN's an amazing place to work because there's problems of scale, and it's an organization that's full of just some of the most amazing journalism and talent. It's like I'm really proud to work there. So we can roll a video and I'll tell you a little more.
Clarissa is on the ground.
Forgive me, I have a slightly inelegant position, but we have just had a massive barrage of rockets.
What is happening with your family?
For these women, this war is personal.
Ashley, the death of your mom, how is that grief different?
I'm so glad I was there. Well, now you've got me, Anderson.
The culture has changed for parents, but now all of these kids are unleashed on society.
The Coast Guard has had this report since 2020.
If CNN hadn't reported on it, we might still not know about it.
My message for the I'm killed is very simple: not give up.
We're CNN. We are journalists.
I asked her why the U.S. She said to have a better future.
This is CNN's special live coverage.
Do you still think that peace is possible?
You support Ukraine or you support Russia? Do you feel democracy will win?
This is such a sign of hope.
In 2024, we have to understand where people are coming from.
Welcome to the whole story.
We have a legal system, but there's no justice necessarily.
I can attest to that.
This is CNN Max, streaming 24/7.
Here are the 5 things you need to know. It's the press and the president.
Plus Harry Enton.
We're on CNN.
It is a national holiday. It is history.
Happy 4th of July, America!
The CNN Hero of the Year. What do you need from the world?
We're journalists.
We're all here for a reason.
Yeah, so CNN is a great company. We've got a huge reach across both linear and digital audiences with one of the largest digital news brands in the world. CNN International is distributed to over 200 countries and territories, so it's a global brand. It's a combination of traditional news as well as scripted programming through groups like CNN Films. And then with NewsSource, we have an affiliate network that goes international with over 1,000 affiliates that help us not only to distribute our product, but they're a great reciprocal path for breaking news in local markets that give us instant reach to that. So,
thanks, Michael. And to that point, with such globally distributed organizations, I know that both you and Ross have been trying to find better ways to have your organization collaborate across all those teams all around the world, whether they're at stations, bureaus, headquarters, or out in the field. Ross, I remember when we first started working almost 3 years ago, one of your main initiatives at the time was being able to drive that collaboration across all of your team members. Can you please tell the audience a little bit more about that initiative?
So we woke up one morning and there was I believe it was a building collapse in Mexico. And it turned out by the end of the day that multiple parts of the CBS News organization had contacted the same people to find out the same information from authorities on the scene. And while that's not a new thing, it also got us to think about, well, why does that need to happen? We're wasting resource, we're wasting people's effort, we're wasting our team's efforts. How do we bring that together? So it was the genesis of what we've called the Superdesk. Internally, that's a very inventive name, clearly, but it was internally called Project Iris. Iris being the eye of CBS and that all-seeing wisdom that comes from being a central pot or repository of information. And so over the last 3 years, and particularly over the last year, we have launched the Superdesk. It went through an RFP process. We partnered with AWS and WolfTech as the vendor that we've gone to. And it's a high-tech solution, but it started very simply. It started on a good old whiteboard. And we went and looked at all the functions that we were doing every day. We looked at all the groups every day, from radio to digital to social, to our affiliates, to our O&O stations, to our network news programs, our magazine shows, our long-form programs, to news gathering. And we sort of said, well, if we were to bring this all together and ensure that there was information available to everybody at the same time in a way that ensures not only that we maintain our accuracy, which is critical to our brand, but also make sure that everyone finds out things at the same time, that there's a central space where we could share content, where we could share video, share graphics, share updates to stories, share tracking information about who's available to report on stories, who's available to contact in certain locations, geographic information. And so that was the genesis of what we called the Superdesk. And this is what it looks like on the left-hand side of the screen. Is a WolfTech page, it's a storyboard, and so within these storyboards effectively you can see all the relevant information that relates to a story. You can see what's approved to go to air or to report upon. You can see what our standards team is recommending around the content that as it relates to that story within WolfTech, and this is a stage to come. They have what's called their Scout, and that's an AI tool that helps give predictive answers and predictive suggestions, as among other things, in terms of standards guidance. If you start using a certain word in a script, for example, it could flag the guidance and the standards needs that we have around the recommendations around that content. And within it, it's starting to embed every single element that may relate to the story, whether it be documents, whether it be video, whether it be graphics, whether it be even analytical information about how a story's performed and what that means in terms of how we make story choices. The analytics are important, I think, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to ask, in addition to all of the collaboration that you're getting with Superdesk, there's a tremendous amount of data that's now coming into Superdesk. And can you please tell our audience a little bit about how you're using and planning to use that data?
Yeah, so I mean, part of the tracking is around money. I mean, we all have to worry about money and how we're spending it, and so that's a critical part. But this is one of the more recent things that we found really helpful. And when we've been talking through with our news directors across the country, evidence of what stories they're covering and the types of stories they're covering where. And this is really instructive for us because it helps us make better decisions. Are we concentrating coverage on certain areas more than others? Have we got too many types of stories that we're preferencing because that's just the decision-making wheel we've been on? So this is starting to help us inform about locations. It's starting to help us inform about being more open to spreading our representation across our markets, being able to spread the types of stories that we're doing and have an ability to do that in a real-time way that enables real-time decision-making around where the content, what the content decisions need to be.
We got some applause out there for that.
I think it was about the basket. I think someone got a basket. I think that was what happened.
And that's also enabling new types of programming.
Yeah, so we launched a rebrand and a relaunch and a resetting of our 24-hour streaming channel, CBS News 24/7, in recent months. I'm happy to say year on year, the minutes viewed for CBS News streaming is more than 50% higher than it was a year ago. And partly that's driven by this sort of programmatic format. This is AR/VR studio out of San Francisco, which is home to some of our streaming product now. We have used the opportunity that we've been working on with AR/VR to really step up the presentation of our 24-hour streaming channel, and the content itself is the result of the Superdesk. All that content that's coming in from all our O&Os, all our international partners, all our network news gathering operations is enabling us to be able to report on material, to gather material and disseminate material in a program format like CBS News 24/7, far easier, far more quickly, far more streamlined, and far more organically than we've ever been able to do before. So not only is there a technology component that's helped the communication flow and the collaboration, it's also helping us make better content, and that's helping audiences engage with us further. So there's a closing the loop in terms of opportunity, and then the audience growth comes with it.
Yeah, so Michael, you also have a very vast field organization. You've got hundreds of feeds coming in, right? You've got multiple field and news desk editors chasing multiple sources and multiple stories. And you had a move recently to get out of the CNN Center in Atlanta. So I'd love for you to tell everybody about how did you do it, number one, and then how did you transform that ingest and edit process?
Yeah, so CNN Center, is the headquarters of CNN in Atlanta. And after many years, we were exiting that facility, moving across town. And as we did that, we had, hundreds of ingest channels. We had 250 edit workstations spread around the facility. We had petabytes of storage, over 100 racks of gear that supported the file-based video operations for CNN. And it just, huge. We looked at moving it to the other facility. It would have been millions of dollars in just power build out just to add that infrastructure, which was going to put a huge amount of strain. And so our challenge to ourselves was, can we move this entire thing to the cloud from the moment we acquire video all the way through the ingest process, editing, and distribution, the whole thing into the cloud with no on-prem dependencies? And so just really an amazing engineering challenge. This is the sort of the obligatory diagram that shows some of the services that we use to do that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but what I will say is that my first reInvent, one of the sessions was a DevOps session. It said, the person was pretty wise. They said the first piece of technical debt you'll ever get is when you use your mouse to hit that create instance button. And that really stuck with me. And so everything that we've done is completely DevOps and automated using Terraform. So basically, this is an entirely software-defined infrastructure, and it's really, really materially impacted our ability to be agile and to innovate with this, because we can turn this thing on a dime now, which is something that used to turn like a battleship. And this is a little bit more of a workflow view, but just to give you a little bit of a sense of scope and scale, on the ingest side, we're talking about right around peak encoding of about 200 encoders. We use Evertz Dreamcatcher running on EC2 in the cloud. We route all the way up from our Magnum routers, all the way up our direct connects, firing up the Dreamcatchers, recording and streaming those growing files into cloud storage for editing. Also in that, we ingest about 8,000 files a month from the internet, just through our internet-based ingest service. And people are contributing about 20,000 resources a month to support the edit workflow. When you go over to processing, we've got about just over 1 million proxy videos in our system, 4.5 billion keyframes describing the video that lives in this environment. And every month, or actually every week, we do about 18,000 ASR transcriptions. That's not what this says. We just, in the past 2 weeks, tripled that number to support this, because we're now feeding all of it through AI to provide content summarization for media that's in the system. If we keep on going to the core system here, we've got a cloud-native media asset management system that's based on AWS Lambda. It's entirely serverless. It's auto-scaling. And so that's been an incredible project to re-implement that using those APIs. And we're partnered with a company called OpenDrives that provides scale-out block storage for those live and growing files and for all of the editing. Again, we've got spin-up, spin-down editing with, right now at this point, we've got over 400 concurrent edit systems spinning up and spinning down on this OpenDrive storage. And it's fantastic because now multiple locations around the world can collaborate on the same media in the same storage, which they could never do when we were on-prem. Going on, I mentioned a little bit about editing, about 5,300 edits a week, and 196,000 renders per year, whether it's an edit or rendering stills out of video for digital. We actually play about 68,000 files out of the system per month. About 10,000 go to digital, and the library fulfills 2 terabytes a day out of the library. The library fulfillments are amazing. You get your full library fulfillment with a 5.9 success rate. Any video in there that you want within about 2 or 3 minutes, it's available for use. So it's a high-scale system. That's what I think is so fun about CNN. We get problems of scale to solve, and really all of our peers in this top-tier broadcasting space. And just to put a little finer point on it, you can see our ingest and edit applications that run in the cloud, and what our capabilities are there. But I wanted to focus a little bit on this.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we were having discussion, leading up to this, you've just shown a very large architectural diagram, right? Which is a lot of pieces and a lot of parts. And when you think about, you've got hundreds of folks making feature requests, right, into your tooling all the time. How often are you deploying code in these systems? And you've got a really cool feature here that I want you to highlight. So
when I started, they hadn't deployed the MAM system in an entire year. I think my first year at CNN, and when we, I think it was right around when we were migrating this all to cloud, and I'd been to my first reInvent, and I sort of got introduced to the idea of CI/CD and of continuous integration, and so we took it as a challenge to see if we could deploy this entire code stack every day. And so the minute somebody checks something into Jira, it runs through the unit tests. We get the approved quality, we auto-build the release notes, and it gets put into the next day's release candidate. We send the release notes to operations, they get an opportunity to review it. If they want to veto it, they click the veto button. If they don't like what they got, they can roll it back, but it rolls out every day in the middle of production seamlessly at 11 a.m. And we wanted to purposefully do it during production, because if there is a problem, we actually want to know, because we have a zero outage rollback. So we can instantly go back to what was running the day before.
I like the story you were telling me about when you didn't deploy.
Yeah, and the greatest moment ever was when my operations partners, the system actually broke one week. And we hadn't deployed, and they came to me and said, we're really, really concerned. And I was like, why? And they're like, we haven't deployed for an entire week. There's going to be a lot of changes. Don't you think it might break something? I was like,
you win.
Yeah.
You win.
Ross, I remember when you first moved to CBS News and stations, one of the challenges that you had across the stations, the O&Os, network, there were a lot of different systems, and you were looking for a way to connect the content and allow the content to flow across those systems. Can you please tell the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's exactly that scenario. So we've got legacy stations that have had different technology than the network. We've got, even within our own network infrastructure, we've got different areas that previously have used different tech and have had different ways of accessing that tech. And so we've got a number of different POCs that have been underway. The most recent involves linking our Washington bureau with our stations in both San Francisco and Philadelphia, and soon Boston, and being able to take content that may be either on-prem or in a cloud environment or in a server environment in a physical location, and being able to then access that into our whole ecosystem. So it's trying to take away the risk profile that comes from having different systems and different structures in different locations, and really nullify that concern, and then enable that to be shared seamlessly across the organization. We call it, as the natural extension of the Superdesk, having our content flow like water across the organization, and now we've got buckets of content in different organizations, some in cloud, some in physical, in servers, and then having that content come together and be accessible everywhere is our nirvana situation. Obviously, Michael's had some success in his approach, and being able to start fresh, I think, is a wonderful way to do that. We've had the challenge of not being able to start fresh and being able to look at our existing infrastructure, our existing locations, and working out how do we best achieve that. I think the benefit of it is also there is a sense of some leverage of machine learning as a result of that process in terms of transcription, search and discovery, but also it's critically helpful for our planning around redundancy and resiliency. If we know we can access content everywhere, and that it's a simple process, it's a straightforward process, done at scale and done economically, then we know we've got better redundancy in how we support all our operations going forward.
That's great, and that's been one of the transformational projects on the daily content and your production asset management systems, but we've also been working together on some transformational archive initiatives. Can you please tell the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, who would have thought archives is sexy? But archives is sexy, or we're trying to make archives sexy, put it that way. And the picture's not sexy. If you look at the image on the left-hand side, this is one of many, many, many rows of video, tape, film stock we have at a multiple football field sized building at Metro Park in Jersey. If you look closely at some of the writing on the spines of the boxes, some of the record keeping is brilliant, some of it is not brilliant at all, and we've got all sorts of levels of lack of understanding, basically, in terms of what that content is. So we currently have about 13 petabytes of known material that we have ingested over the course of X number of years. We expect, through the result of our archive transformation project and the metadata enrichment that will come with it, we'll probably increase that by 4 times, so more than 45, 46, up to 50 petabytes of material will be digitized and therefore able to be accessed in some form. Part of the journey with AWS has been to look at such scale and such size. We cannot possibly look at all of it. We cannot possibly enrich all of it. It would be cost prohibitive to do that. It would be time prohibitive to do that. So some of the recommendations that we are excited by and we're seeing working for us is a triaging as a first brush. So we take account of what is sort of gold material, silver material, maybe bronze material. That then indicates how we want to access that material, what level of enrichment we want to apply to that material. And so the supercharged gold standard material will get the full shebang, the full treatment, the full metadata enrichment and processing of that. Some work to do in terms of how we do that and at what level we're doing that. But fundamentally, first steps are, what is the material? Which of it is valuable? How do we then break that down to be able to apply further scrutiny over the top of all of it? Some of the interesting things we've been talking about is just knowing when nothing's happening in a tape feed, for example, and making sure that we don't unduly ingest material that's never going to see the light of day, that's never going to help anybody do anything. And so having metrics along that, metrics around identifying material that's ours and not someone else's, having metrics around identifying the types of material, whether it be landscapes or interviews or whatever that may need to be to help demarcate the sort of content that's there. There are boxes there that have got scribbled writing on them in the dusty back corner that we've got no idea how valuable it might be. We've got no idea how we might be able to use it and then enrich it and then hopefully provide future value propositions that helps continue to extract value from the archive well into the future.
Yeah, so let's, I'd love to dig in a little bit too on your historical archive journey, maybe talking a little bit about CNN's cloud library, and also you've had a renewed focus yourself in your role, right, on generative AI and maybe how you're using generative AI and thinking about that.
Yeah, AI is awesome. But I'll start with the cloud library. And this originally was a business continuity project that as over time went on and we had to replace robots and we started to think about getting out of CNN Center, it became an emergency. Oh my God, we've got a lot of data to move. Just to get a sense for how big the robots were that held this, they were the size of school buses, and there were multiple of them. And I remember putting a new one in and having properties call me and say, by the way, we think we just overloaded the floor. That thing weighs about what a tank weighs. And I had to call a vice president at CNN and say, you need to vacate your office right now because it is right above your head. Yeah. But it took us a year just to read this data, probably more than a year. And we had a countdown to being out of the building with like a $10 million a month penalty if we didn't make it, And so we're reading this data out of the cloud, but we got it all out. It's just over 33 petabytes right now. It's 3 million digital video files, about 1 million hours of video, 43 years of news history. We grow at about 5 terabytes a day. We use recognition currently to auto-generate metadata. That's moving towards a more LLM-based Gen AI metadata enrichment model. This is kind of the older stuff that we've done, but that's.
Well, I know using recognition. I know cost efficiency. I think Ross brought it up as well. Is kind of top of mind. Maybe talk a little bit too about your thinking around how you were looking at the tiering and how you were looking at the content.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different strategies for generating metadata. There's the traditional like computer vision stuff that you get with the recognition offering, but now as we're going into multimodal video models, we can put multiple data types in, like images in or video in, and what we get back is a knowledge and language independent representation of that content, which is the vector embeddings, and those vector embeddings really can then be used to do semantic queries. So you could say, I'm looking for emotional moments in all of our, campaign footage, right? That would be an impossible thing to find with traditional metadata. It is a trivial search using semantic search. And so when you can layer that together with your traditional metadata searching, you can do all the things that traditional metadata is really good at, like filtering and sorting and ranking, with the things that only semantic searches can do, like that sort of like emotional content or the aboutness of something. And so put together, it's just incredibly, incredibly powerful. And you can also do some things that you would never be able to do in a traditional search interface. Like, what if I ingest, a press conference, and I want to ask, was the content of that press conference maybe a little different to the content of the last time that person gave a press conference? And could you elaborate a little bit on the differences thematically and maybe where they contradicted themselves? With an AI-based search, you get that entire level of video analytics that appears over the top in natural language that you would never get from a traditional search. And I think we're moving from search to understanding, to really kind of power the creative process. But yeah, there's also kind of tiering, because that kind of like super deep vectorization is expensive. You're talking about taking petabytes of video and putting it through a very intensive GPU process to generate those vectors. where if you needed to do it a little more cheaply, maybe you could extract images, get the textual description of that, and then vectorize the text. And now you've got the aboutness of that without necessarily having to do the full multimodal. So we're talking about a tiered strategy where certain kinds of content would go through the full multimodal vectorization. Others could go through the more cost-effective, which by the way is, you're talking about like a 1/100th of the cost, so big cost differences between those.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I know you're also using generative AI and AI ML in a lot of other ways in your day-to-day operations as well. If you want to talk a little bit about that, I think that's next.
Yeah, so I think one of the most interesting and fun things we've done over the past year is to build this journalist assist chatbot. And our idea was that news workflow is hard. Like, it takes a long time to ramp up new staff and explain to them the workflow, lots of training and onboarding. And we thought, well, what if we could just put a natural language interface in front of that process? So if you understand kind of high level what you want to do, just tell it what you want to do. Right. Instead of learning this sort of arcane GUIs and workflows. So we put basically about 20 some odd systems behind this natural language interface. And sometimes it's like searching. It's like, I need to find video on this. But it could also be, hey, I need to roll on that press conference. Could you please arrange the recording for me? And it's doing everything. It's controlling the router. It's sending up the line. It's firing up the encoder. It's creating the asset. It's setting up the metadata. So saving tons and tons of clicks. But the person really just has to know, I just wanted to record that press conference, right? So it's really, again, taking the friction out, because no one went to journalism school because they want to do 30 clicks to set up a recording, right? They want to tell a story, and we want to get them in storytelling mode as fast as possible. And I think one thing that really a huge shout out to CNN's legal, standards and practices, and editorial groups who were so behind this from day one, just really leaning into the innovation of getting our editorial teams more AI literate and putting these tools in their hands, even though we all know it's early days with a lot of this technology. And so this rolled out about 3 months ago. We're about to come up on the second big release. And we've learned so much. Like when we first launched it, we said, hey, don't trust anything this thing says. There might be hallucinations. So even though it answered your question, you can't trust it. So we just added the ability to do citations. So now you can click on the footnote under it and read the exact text that was used to feed into the answer that was just provided to you. So you can do that kind of journalistic fact checking on the fly. Other thing, and we're currently working with AWS to add Bedrock and Anthropic as core LLMs into the system, which I think is going to be great, because one thing we found is all LLMs are not created equal, and you want to use different LLMs and small language models for different tasks.
Yeah.
And so, as a great example, Anthropic is fabulous at translating. So we want to make sure people land in Anthropic for translating, but it might not be the best thing if it's trying to evaluate a response to implement guardrails. And so in that kind of case, like one of the new lower cost, super fast Nova language models might be an ideal model to use for implementing guardrails. So anyway, we're really excited about that.
Yeah.
I love that agility. And I know we've been talking a lot about using generative AI and LLMs to help with storytelling and news operations. But as we talked about at the very beginning of this session, there's also increasing concern about potential more nefarious uses of generative AI, and especially when it comes to synthetic media and how that could be used to help spread misinformation. In April, AWS joined the steering committee of C2PA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. And I know that both you, Ross, and Michael have initiatives also for combating misinformation. Let's start with you, Ross. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the things CBS News and Stations is doing?
Yeah, I think it is potentially the biggest threat facing the industry right now, and I don't say that lightly. We launched CBS News Confirmed towards the end of last year, and it's a multi-pronged approach. It's a physical team, it's an actual team of journalists who are highly skilled at being able to understand, track, forensically assess material and be able to alarm us and warn us and ensure that we're only putting accurate content to air. But as part of that process, there's a technology element as well, and we've done countless POCs with relatively new vendors who are all promising to be able to flag deep fake content. We've partnered with one of them, Reality Defender is their name, and we've been using them for about a year now to amp up alarm and alerts around something that doesn't seem quite right. Now, of course, it will never replace the human role, and part of the investment in CBS News Confirmed is absolutely about the skill set of our people and our teams and making sure that they are able to spot and see and work towards ensuring that we continue to protect that accuracy legacy of CBS News. But the tech has a role. We've been part of a group with IBC, including the BBC, where we've looked at things like how do we partner better on provenance? How do we partner better on collaboration? And how do we partner better on tech? Because it sort of occurs to me we don't need to all be doing this at the same time. It's a waste of time and effort. When in reality, the industry as a whole needs to benefit from being more secure and more protected against these sorts of concerns. Even to the point that certainly CBS News and Station's view is it's in no one's interest for CNN to get something wrong because it affects the brand damage, it affects the entire industry's brand if a main player gets something wrong because someone is trying to do something untoward in terms of fake content. So we think we should be really open about saying, hey guys, we found this bit of content. You all should know this is not accurate. This is a fake. This is completely wrong. We think there's no competitive advantage for us getting something right and one of our rivals getting something grossly wrong. Now, of course, that shouldn't stop the competitive pressure and the competitive need for us to break stories and to do so in a way that we've always been proud of. But at the same time, we do think as an industry there is a role to play about ensuring that we are all aligned where we can be on calling out when something is painfully, obviously going to cause damage to our entire reputation as a mainstream media provider. And so CBS Confirmed has an element of that. Our head of standards is talking to other heads of standards, and we're continuing to work with organizations like the IBC around how do we best communicate that, how do we best continue those conversations to help the industry be in a better place, not just now, but in the years to come, when the threat is only going to get much, much higher, I think.
Absolutely. And Michael, I know at CNN there's also a number of initiatives to combat misinformation. Can you please?
Yeah. I mean, I think huge resonance with our legal team and with our kind of fact-checking desk around the risk of misinformation. So we're doing similar strategy around deepfake detection. One thing we have found is that similar to not all LLMs are well suited for every task. Yeah. A lot of the deepfake approaches to detection are different, and so and I think Reality Defender's probably like a lot of the people we're working with. They have a selection of models that they'll automatically profile your incoming media, load up the right models, do the right analysis, and then kind of respond. So, but I think that it is important that it's not purely an automated process. I think there needs to be that ability to escalate to a forensic analyst sometimes that can understand, because a lot of times the misinformation is not actually synthetic media, it's media used out of context. And so that's something that a machine it's very hard for the machine to pick that up, So, but the one thing I would also say maybe is this is an arms race between the deepfake detectors and the Gen AI. And ultimately, I think content provenance metadata and content authenticity metadata is going to be really important to ascertaining whether something is, I'm not going to say real because I think there'll be good reasons synthetic media exists, but like where did it come from and what was its origin? That's really what we want to know, right?
Yeah, amazing. So I'm going to maybe lane change a little bit. We've talked a lot about strategy, transformations, technology around that. I always look at every transformation, there's three parts to it. There's people, there's process, and tools. I think we've talked a little bit about efficiencies in process, we've talked about tooling. I wanted to kind of hit on the people aspect here for a second. And what did it take from a transformation perspective on the people side? So I'll look to Michael. Why don't we start with you, or Ross? Either way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we started this, I looked at the team, and we had a lot of people that were really, really great at building an edit suite. They knew Macintosh, they could build, hook up all the monitoring, they knew everything about how it worked. We had people that were great at running video servers, right? And they'd done the, harmonic, omnion, leech, whatever video training and knew exactly how to set those up. I definitely did not see a bunch of DevOps engineers. That was definitely not what I saw. And so I just was really upfront with the team. I was like, We're not there now, but within the next 3 years, this whole tech stack is going to transform. And we as engineers need to transform with it. And this has happened before. It's not the first time. We're going to make training available. We're going to give you time. We're going to give you resources. But it's really up to you to make that leap to become cloud engineers. And I was really very passionate about not giving this to a separate corporate cloud team. Because I feel like these are engineers that understand the workflows, they understand our customers, they understand the technology, and I'm like, you need to know how to build in the cloud. And so what we did was transform the organization into a team of cloud builders. And most people made it. I think there were a few, as with every big tech transition, that the change didn't really stick. Most people made it, and I'm really kind of proud looking back to see that those people not only kind of transformed the way they go about this, but I think they transformed their careers. Because as cloud engineers and cloud builders, they actually became very valuable in a much larger marketplace than a very niche broadcast technology tech stack that we are used to operating in.
I think in a similar way, I mean, we've had 3,000 users, or more than 3,000 users now over the past year come on board with the Superdesk. And we've had various levels of success, but overall it's been, I think, the single most successful tech project I've been involved in rolling out. And part of that, I think, has come from the exact point that Michael made, and that is having strong leadership. Obviously, him being a strong leader and being able to direct his team and to be able to say, this is what we stand for and this is what we're going to do, has to absolutely be part of how a transformation journey starts. We were lucky at CBS News and stations to have a clear mandate to say, we want to collaborate more across the organization. You have the authority, Ross, to go and make this happen. And we did. So clear leadership and ownership and buy-in from the top has to happen for it to work. The second thing that is real, and this is interesting, we employ people in our industry to be contrary, we employ people to be questioning, we employ people to be demanding, we employ people to be contrary in many respects. And then we get surprised when they turn it around and they do it to us in our organizations. So we've got to be ready to deal with that, and we've got to be ready to combat some of that normal cynicism that many newsrooms have. And the way we've done that is twofold. Beyond the leadership buy-in, it's also been face-to-face. Not a Zoom call, not a video training mechanism, not some document that people were shoved in front of their faces and say, read this. The only way it worked and the buy-in became more significant is if we had real people sitting in a real room, talking face-to-face, almost going one by one-to-one group to ensure people bought into the concept of the Superdesk. And so that absolutely was vital. And then the third thing that helped us on our journey, at least, is around evangelists. And this is not rocket science. Again, these are very simple concepts. I'm not trying to make it sound more complicated than it is. Having people who absolutely stand for what you're trying to do, and being able to be the ambassadors of that, and being able to educate and cajole and to convince. And to some extent, we've used a bit of FOMO from time to time. We've used a bit of, oh, you haven't heard about the new feature? Oh my God, well, really? Well, it's much better than it was when we first launched it. And so, using that sort of approach, real leadership and direct leadership, communication directly in terms of training, and then making sure you've got the right skill set and the right people who are enthusiastic converts and can then be enthusiastic trainers and cajolers and convincers to come along on the tech journey. That's what's worked for us.
And having had the pleasure of working with you on the Superdesk, I think one of the things that impressed me on the topic of evangelism was even early on, as we were thinking about working together on the RFP process and the scorecard, you were able to bring such a breadth and depth of stakeholders from across the organization to that process, like just from day one, and continue that through the entire process, including now as we're doing more releases. Can you tell us a little bit about like some of those benefits of having the breadth and depth across the organization?
So I think having buy-in, again, not a complicated concept, but having buy-in from all the various stakeholders was critical. Having had the benefit of WolfTech, and one of the reasons we went with WolfTech is, unlike some of our legacy rundown systems that take a year or 2 years to do an upgrade or to have something fresh or renewed or a fix that you've asked for, WolfTech as our platform for the Superdesk, we're sort of doing releases once a month or thereabouts, once every 6 weeks. And the way we can do that is we get feedback from all the teams that are coming on board, and they say, we don't like that. We do like that. We want it to do this. We want it to follow a story. We want the storyboard to mean this. We want the color to be this. We want whatever it is we want to change. We've been able to do that in a relative real-world, real-time way. And so the product that we launched a year ago is not the product that we are using today. It's dramatically better. And it's dramatically better because we've had buy-in from all our stakeholders as they've entered into the journey on the Superdesk. And so people are able to see, we didn't like that, or we wanted it to do this, and now it does those things, and now it isn't the annoyance that it was when perhaps they first started to use it. So having a dynamic partnerships with AWS and WolfTech particularly have helped us be able to do that. Now, it hasn't been all plain sailing. Yes, there are speed bumps still to come, there are frustrations still to come, as there are with any big technology and human rollout and human change process. But the idea that we can listen to people's concerns, address those concerns in a timely way, and then ensure the product that we leave them or give them is better than what they started with has been a good outcome.
And on that topic of speed bumps, I remember there have been times when working with both of you where not all of the information was present, and oftentimes working across customers, there's times where it seems like projects stall when people are looking to cross off all of the questions and check all the boxes and get as much information as possible.
That analysis paralysis, right?
Exactly, the analysis paralysis. Can you tell us a little bit about the strategies you use to know when to push forward with incomplete information versus when to hold back and wait for more information to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a really big fan of emergent design. I think a lot of times you don't actually know all the requirements or the design criteria when you start. A lot of times you discover those along the way. And so I think certainly with software development, that's a big deal. You want to have emergent design. Well, when you have software-defined architecture, you actually have this luxury of emergent design that you don't have in a traditional kind of hardware procurement type setting. But yeah, and sometimes you screw up. You get into it and you realize, oops.
Yep.
And I think the key is just being able to fail fast. And I remember we're looking at adopting some kind of like video game technology for broadcast graphics, like about a year ago. And in that we realized about halfway through that it kind of wasn't quite ready to integrate into our workflows and stuff like that. And we were able to pivot pretty quickly off of that to another strategy for that. But I think that you're not always right. But I think you kind of got to be in the arena, and you got to be willing to fail, and you got to be, we learn by doing. I think we don't learn by studying a lot of times. Like that's our culture. Ross, how do you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there are times in life where you've just got to make a gut call, haven't you? And you've got to take the best of the wisdom that your team has, and that your guidance has, that your consultants have, that your intelligence has. And like you, I've been doing this for a little while. And I think at a certain point you do get a sense of we are stuck. We are stuck in a space where we've got to have some sort of movement to help it go to the next level. And you're right, it may be wrong, it may be the wrong call, but I think better to be having movement in the right direction and then correct the course than to be staying stuck, because nothing is being evolved if you don't make a move forward in some form. Now that frustrates people from time to time. I'm sure it means we waste some time from time to time. But it's better to be in that trajectory rather than paused and back to that analysis paralysis position.
So as the clock is winding down, I want to thank both of you for being amazing customers and amazing innovators in this space. We're going to maybe hang out here, once we shut down the stream, we'll hang out here for a few minutes if people have any questions that they'd like to ask of any of us. Thank you, Ali, for co-hosting, and appreciate both of you for taking the time today, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure, Ross.